Everybody, this is Dream, and we have a nice 13-game slate that starts at 7 p.m. Friday for the main slate with Major League Baseball. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the matchups that I really like to target when it comes to bats against bad pitching. So we have Boston, Minnesota, St. Louis, Texas, and New York Mets. Those are my stackable teams. The Texas is going up against Pivetta, which is one of my favorite pitchers to go up against. And then Boston is going against Dallas Keuchel, which is one of the other pitchers I really like to go against. The other three teams are going against pitchers that have not been very good this season, and so we definitely have some advantages in those games. I'm also going to mention Kansas City. If there's a left hitter, then he's going to have a tremendous advantage today against Drew Hutchinson. And I think that's pretty much Milwaukee right-handed hitters are in a good place. And then also Oakland is in a good place when it comes to right-handed hitters. So those are going to be our primary looking potential for batters. But with that said, let's go ahead and get in the pitchers I do like today. So my top overall pitcher is Charlie Morton for the Atlanta Braves against Miami. In 7 games versus Miami in the last 2 seasons, he's had 5 games over 7 strikeouts. He's also had a lot of really good games against them. Now, his only game this season wasn't quite as good. He had 14.6 points per game, and he's been a little bit hit and miss all season, but he's been better lately, and so I think that he's kind of due for a really good game against Miami. Miami's been kind of not in a great place, and so he has some advantage. Now, he is a little bit risky because he may not get the win, but he has the lowest the lowest points against potential today. With Miami being the lowest points on the board. Excuse me. The second one is his opponent, Sandy Alcantara, against Atlanta. Now, I typically try to avoid people against Atlanta, but Atlanta hasn't been quite as good in the last week, just hitting the ball wise. And Alcantara has played Atlanta 6 times in the last 2 years. 5 of those over 20 fantasy points, and then this season, 21 strikeouts in the 2 games against them. And you'll see here that he's averaging 40 fantasy points a game in those 2 games. That's a crazy amount. He's got some really high upside because he can really get strikeouts, and Atlanta definitely has tendency to have games where they can strike out a lot. Obviously, they're good at hitting home runs as well, but Alcantara is a guy that, he's almost too good not to use in this matchup just because he's a high strikeout pitcher and they kind of have the tendency to get strikeouts. So I think he's a pretty solid option. You would definitely probably want to use one of Morton or Alcantara at least, just depending on which team you think is going to win or who's going to go up the most earned runs while they're in the game. The next guy I like a lot is Luis Castillo for Seattle. Obviously, he's been good against Cleveland. Cleveland's been kind of up and down lately, but in the last 10 games for Luis Castillo, 9 of those games he's been over 20 fantasy points, or I think 19 actually. And then he also had 10 strikeouts the last time he went against Cleveland. So I think he's probably in a really solid situation. He's averaging 25 fantasy points per game over the last 10, and overall he's just a pretty safe option. He's getting a lot of strikeouts lately as well, and so I like him as a good option. And then my final option is the cheapest guy that I have on the list, and that's Jordan Montgomery for St. Louis against the Chicago Cubs. Now, he has only played 2 games against Chicago Cubs this season, but in one of those games he had 42 points, and the other one he had 26, so he's averaging 34. Now, he doesn't get quite as many strikeouts as some of these other pitchers I've mentioned, but he's also a little bit cheaper, and so he's definitely going to have an advantage from that perspective. He's been kind of hit and miss lately. His last game against Atlanta was really rough. Of course, Atlanta was really hitting the ball well in that game, so it's not too surprising. Atlanta's a really good team. But as you can see, like even against the last time against the Cubs, 42 points, Colorado 26, Milwaukee 29, and so forth. He's got some upside to him, and so if he can get some strikeouts against them, and considering he's played so well against Chicago, I felt like he was a pretty decent option as an alternative to the other guys. Unfortunately, in this matchup, there's really not a lot of really decent cheap options. The only guys that I even remotely like is David Peterson going up against Washington. However, he hasn't been great against Washington this season. He had one game where he got -2 points, but he still has some potential in this particular game just because Washington is not very good. And then that's really all. I mean, everybody else is kind of hit and miss. Don't really have very good situations. Actually, there's one more. I'm sorry, and that's Lance McCullers for Houston against LA. I mean, he's been only played 3 games, and it's not been against. He hasn't done particularly great because he only made it through 5 innings in those games, but he's also uh, he's trying to get his feet underneath him, and so it hadn't been bad, but he doesn't get a ton of strikeouts, and I feel like his price is probably too high. But again, considering he's going against Oakland, Atlanta, and Baltimore, and Oakland he did fine against, but obviously Atlanta is a good team, and then Baltimore has been playing well as of late, and so I think that going against the Angels, who really only have 2 guys that can hit you, he might be a pretty decent play. I wish he was a little bit less expensive, though. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the different positions. So I'll get into the catchers. I have 5 guys that I think are pretty decent. 4 of them are going to be top tier guys, and then 1 Hail Mary. So the first guy I like is MJ Melendez. He has home run potential, which is something I really look for in catchers. And if he does play, because sometimes Kansas City doesn't play both Melendez and Perez, he's a pretty decent option against Detroit. And another guy that I like as well is Salvador Perez, which is the other catcher for Kansas City. He's actually been hitting the ball really well. He's got 2 home runs the last 10, 325 average. And he's probably a little bit safer than MJ, but my favorite overall option is actually Sean Murphy for Oakland. He's been hitting the ball extremely well. He's been getting lots of hits and stuff. He's got 13 hits in the last 10 games, averaging 8.2. Now his price has come up a little bit, but they still have a good matchup, and so he's definitely somebody that seems pretty reliable. And I feel like you couldn't really go wrong with any of those guys. And then obviously Will Smith for the Dodgers. Now he's going against Darvish, who's a little bit tougher, but he's still been mashing San Diego this season, so I imagine that he's definitely somebody worth to take a look at. My Hail Mary option is Shea Langerles. As we know about him, he has that, hit boomer bust kind of mentality. And so, I don't even see him on here all of a sudden. I was going to show you a stat. Let's see. There he is. He is, he's kind of boomer bust because he strikeouts a ton, but he has home run potential and stuff like that. And as you can see in the games, like he's got 4 games basically where he's just smashed almost 20 points each game, and then the other games he'll have like 2 or 3 strikeouts. So you do have to be a little bit aware of that. But he's in a plus matchup, and so if you really want to pay down, he's the Hail Mary option for the catching position. But I definitely recommend Sean Murphy or Perez or Will Smith as the top tier options. At first base, we have actually a lot of good options here. My favorite ones are going to be... Oops, let me fix this. Alright, yeah, so my favorite ones are going to be Andrew Vaughn for the Chicago White Sox, who's obviously been doing really good lately. 2 home runs the last 10 games. The White Sox have been playing pretty decent and scoring runs and stuff, so I definitely like them, and I like him as a potential player at first base. The next guy is Rowdy Tellez for Milwaukee against Davies. He obviously has home run potential. He has 2 home runs in the last 10, but he's also not been hitting the ball very well. His batting average is really bad. But he also isn't really having too many strikeouts. He's averaging 1 a game. Obviously, we would like that to be a little bit less, but he definitely has home run potential, and at any point, he's just going to break out and start smashing. It's just the fact that he's not great at he hits contact, but sometimes he's just hitting directly to like the outfielders and stuff. Then the next guy that I really like, and I really like this guy a lot. This is where is he? Nate Lowe for Texas against Pivetta. Man, I love putting people against Pivetta, and Nate Lowe has just been completely on fire lately. I'm really struggling to even care about anybody else at his position for today because of this particular matchup. And he's got 5 home runs in the last 10 games, and every day I feel like I look and he still has 5 in the last 10. So because he's just been completely matching the ball, and even the days he doesn't hit a 5 home run, he's been scoring, 10 or 12 fantasy point, 8 to 12 fantasy points. So we definitely like what he's been doing. Just a couple other guys I think are really good for this day is Luke Voigt. He's been averaging 5.6, but he's also hitting home runs, and he's a home run potential guy. And he's got a really nice plus matchup in this particular situation against Peterson of the New York Mets, who's been kind of hit or miss this season. And then Ty France is another guy for Seattle against Plazak. He's been hitting the ball really well. 3 home runs last 10, 6.9, 250. A little bit off of his regular average, but he has home run potential. He had a few games where he didn't start, but he kind of pinch hit, so that's kind of hurting his average a little bit for the last 10. But overall, I think he's a really solid option based on what he's been doing this year. And then I have one Hail Mary option here. If he does play, the guy that's going for 700 home runs, he's just a few away. I think he's, 6 away now? And, yeah, I think it's at 694. And so, Albert Pujols, if he starts, then we gotta put him in there and hope that he can get a home run in this particular matchup. He'll be at home against Sampson, who's not a very good pitcher. For Pujols' sake, this guy is really not a good pitcher at all, and we can definitely take advantage of that. If you want a minimum price player at first base, Pujols is your guy. Obviously, that's kind of a Hail Mary because he may or may not play, and if he does play, sometimes he doesn't really do much. It's not like he's going to steal bases and stuff like that, but we can have fun tracking the potential next home run as he closes in on 700. And then at second base, I've got 6 guys. One of them is a Hail Mary. The other 5 are guys I really like. And so to get into those guys, Kiki Hernandez for the Boston Red Sox is my first guy against Keuchel. He has home run potential, and he's just starting to get going. He hadn't played that much this season, but he does pretty well against Texas, and he's been actually batting pretty well as of late. His price is pretty cheap too, so you can knock him in there and get a decent option. Colton Wong is my next guy. Now I've liked him a lot lately, and he has definitely been beneficial. He's averaging almost 10 points per game. He's had 3 home runs in the last 10, batting .333, well above his average. And he's just been maneuvering pretty well. Now he didn't win yesterday, didn't do good yesterday, but I think that he'll probably bounce back today against Arizona, against weaker pitching with Davies. And so I like him quite a bit. The next guy I like is a little bit more expensive, and it's Trevor Story against Keuchel. I mean, Keuchel is a guy, he's just going to give up. He's going to give up some runs. It's just like, who's he going to give them to? And people like Story and Kiki Hernandez are definitely people that are definitely in the running for that. The next guy I like is Simeon for Texas. Man, he's been really batting the ball well. 2 home runs last 10, but 11.7 points per game. And obviously, we need him to get close to 10 for him to really pay off for us, for Texas as well. And he's going against Pivetta, I just love going against this guy. So, McNeil is the next guy for the New York Mets. He hasn't been quite as good lately as we like, but he is kind of due for a big game. And I think that, he's kind of a secondary option in this particular matchup against Washington, but he definitely has some upside. And then my Hail Mary option is Mark Mathias for Texas, just because he's going against Pivetta. And he's just been bashing the ball lately. I used him yesterday, and he definitely gave me 7 points at a minimum salary, which is really nice. And I look for him to be able to do something similar again, and hopefully bash another home run, because he's been doing that sometimes. So he's been hitting the ball great for Texas, and they got a really nice matchup for him. So, and he can also play a couple of different positions, which is nice. So anyway, let's go ahead and get in the third base. So my favorite guy is gonna be Brendan Donovan. He has been doing really well as of late. He doesn't really hit home runs though, but he's been hitting real solid, and he's got a nice little plus matchup here against Chicago. Dozier for Kansas City is another guy I really like at this position. He definitely has some home run potential. He's kind of due for one, to be honest. But just the situation he's in, And if he starts, then I think he's a pretty solid option. And you can also throw him into outfield if you want. Um, the next guy I like is Gio Urshela. He's been hitting the ball pretty well. He's got a triple in the last 10 games. And he's not as much of a home run hitter, but he's been pretty safe lately. Some of the guys on Minnesota have been kind of more hit and miss, but he's been pretty consistent, just getting some points here and there. And then Ramon, let's see here, Ramon Urias for Baltimore. Uh, Baltimore looks like they're going to have a really nice game, and they've been playing really well, and he's one of the reasons. Now, he doesn't have the best batting average, but he does have some power and potential, and going against Oakland, he's going to have some upside. Let's see here. Who else do I got? I got two more guys, and then I have a Hail Mary guy, and so the next guy is Emmanuel Rivera, which I've actually used him quite a bit lately, and he's really been nice. Where is he? Oh, yeah, here he is. Now, he does have a little bit of tougher matchup against Lauer, but he has been hitting the ball really well. 8.1 points per game. He's got a home run threat going, stuff like that. And you can see he's really not having any terrible games. I mean, he's had one or two, but he's in a pretty good situation for himself. If he can get to Lauer, who probably lately hadn't been, he's been kind of hit or miss. I think he could probably either get to him or just to the later pitching, and obviously he's super inexpensive. There are lots of super inexpensive options at this position, but if you want an expensive one, Rafael Devers is the guy. He has some potential just in this matchup for Boston. I like both Texas and Boston players because of who the pitchers they're going up against, and so I definitely like him. And then obviously the Hail Mary today is going to be Mr. Gunnar Henderson, who's had two games in the majors so far, and he's had 8 and 17 fantasy points. He looks like he's going to be pretty solid for Baltimore. They're playing pretty well, and they're not going up against anybody that's very good as a pitching perspective. And so I look for him to have a potentially another good game. And so hopefully he can keep it up and would be a good option as a Hail Mary option. If you want to pay down a lot, you can opt to go to him. So then at shortstop, I have Mr. Baez. He's at the top of my list of decent options. He's been, where is he? He's been playing pretty well lately. He doesn't really strike out a ton, but he does need to hit the ball better. He's had a couple really big games, and so I kind of look at this situation as a spot where he's going to have some good games because he was kind of hurt lately, and so that's probably hurt him a little bit. But overall, I think he's a pretty good option. But I actually like a couple of guys better. One of them is Bogarts for Boston against Keuchel. You've seen a lot of Boston guys in here. 12.6 points a game, 3 home runs, really nice. And then also Jeremy Pena. Jeremy Pena has had a little bit of a rougher time as of late, but he has been having a couple of good games where he's gotten some hits now, and so hopefully he can continue that and build upon it. He's got a good matchup against the LA Angels, and definitely like going up against Detmers just because the Angels don't seem to do very good use of him. He seems like a pretty good pitcher when you look at his metrics, but it's just like they always, I don't know what the Angels are doing. They're just messing them up. At any rate, then I have Carlos Correa from Minnesota against the White Sox. He's been hitting the ball great, 324 last 10 with 6 RBIs and a home run, and so I think he's a pretty solid option, though he's a little bit more expensive. And then Bobby Witt, he's been the guy that I've liked to target recently, and Kansas City's in a good position against a subpar pitcher. He's also hit the ball really well against Detroit itself. And so that's kind of the guys who I like at shortstop. There wasn't anybody else like a low-end guy that I thought was real good, so I would definitely try to prioritize either getting Bogarts or Bobby Witt or Jeremy Pena in that lineup as my top 3 overall. So then to go ahead and get to the outfielders, so we have several guys. Leody Taveras for Texas against Pivetta, just another guy that I like to roster occasionally. He doesn't really hit home runs, but he's been getting hits and stuff, and he has tendency to score 7 to 10 fantasy points, which is really good for a $2,200 guy. If we need to save money, he's a good way to do it. Another guy that's really been playing well lately is Lars Nootbaar. He's had 3 home runs the last 10 games. He's been hitting the ball really good. So he's also done pretty good against the Chicago Cubs in 15 games, 285 with almost 6.5 points per game. But he's actually been doing a lot better than that overall recently. So I think he can probably improve on that. And he's super inexpensive. One of my favorite plays at outfield is Alex Verdugo for Boston against Keuchel. He has been just absolutely killing the ball, 341 in the last 10 games. He's been fun to watch and see how his stats keep playing up. I think I've been using him in my main lineup almost every day, and I haven't really been that disappointed with him at all. I've already talked about Hunter Dozier. Another guy that I like is Max Kepler. I mentioned him the other day, and he got 10 points that day. He's had some really good games lately, and plus matchups, I tend to like him. And, he's a pretty solid guy. He tends to get, the 7 to 10 range when you need it. Then the next guy I like is Tommy Pham against Keuchel. Man, there's a lot of Boston and Texas guys in here because that matchup is for both teams is so juicy. I don't know which pitcher is going to get the loss, but I bet you one of them does. And, because this game is going to get out of hand pretty quick for both teams. This guy's been hitting the ball pretty good. He is, he's not really had any too terrible games with the exception of one against Toronto. But he's been pretty good. I mean, 7.5 last 10, batting 300. I'm a little surprised he didn't get more than 1 home run, but he's kind of due for another one. And so he's a little bit more expensive, but, if you can work out the different guys, then you'll be able to afford them. Then, of course, I talked about Kiki Hernandez already. He has a nice advantage of being able to play in the outfield. And then Riley Green for Detroit against Lynch. This guy's been really mashing the ball lately, batting 439 in the last 10 games, 12.2. I definitely like him as an option. He's gotten 2 triples and 2 home runs the last 10 games. And you can see that the output's really solid. So I definitely like what he's doing. Then JD Martinez, another guy from the Boston Red Sox. I mean, how can you dislike that game between the Boston and Texas with the pitchers? Now his price has actually come down a little bit, but I think that's probably kind of silly considering how good he is and how his batting average, I guess, has been a little bit lower, but he's still got a lot of home run potential, and hopefully he can get going again, because he had a 35-game home run drought, which is a little surprising for him, but he seems like he's gotten back on track. And then the next guy I like is Jake McCarthy. Now, he has a tougher matchup for Arizona, but I think he's been batting so good that he's probably worth taking a look at, and he's pretty inexpensive. He's averaging 13.3 last 10 games with 3 home runs, and he's just been playing really well. Yesterday was really the only bad game he's had recently, and I look for him to bounce back and have a big game again. Then Andrew Vaughn, who I've already talked about, obviously is a good option. And then last but not least is Austin Hayes for Baltimore. I really kind of like Baltimore against Oakland just because of the pitching and stuff like that, and because Baltimore has been playing pretty well. He averages 7.3 against Oakland, and while he's had a couple off games, I still think that he's a home run threat for this particular game, and so I think he's somebody you have to take a look at. So with that said, I think that's pretty much what I have for these matchups. I think we got some really good pitchers. I got some really good hitters available. We got some games that we really want to try to stack around. I can't believe how juicy this Boston-Texas game is, but just from a stacking perspective, you could almost stack both teams and probably feel pretty good. So that's pretty much what I have for this. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And if you have any comments or questions or any players that you think that I didn't talk about that you might want some information on, feel free to leave that below in the comments, and have a nice day, guys.